Okay, so we're going to do brief introduction to our chapter. Gregor Mendel is oftentimes seen as the father of genetics. He was an Austrian monk who studied pea plants for many generations. So he gardened and kept track of the traits that the plants were growing with. So he discovered that some of the traits, such as being tall or being having rounded seeds, were dominant, which were stronger traits. And then he also discovered that some of the traits that the pea plants inherited were recessive, meaning they were weak. So, where are these traits coming from? So, I think it's important to understand on a cellular level what's happening. So, each one of our cells contains a nucleus, and inside that nucleus are chromosomes. The picture there is of a chromosome. Chromosomes organize the genes, and it's not genes like genes you wear, but genes, GENES. Those genes are within each chromosome. So each one of our 46 chromosomes in the human body is 23 pair, so 23 identical chromosomes. And on each one of those 23 chromosomes, there are literally hundreds of genes that code for things such as our height, whether our hair is brown or blonde. Just to give you kind of a example, humans have 46 chromosomes and fruit flies have 8. Um, in addition to that, the genes are further broken down into DNA. And DNA is that twisted ladder. So all the DNA crumples together to make a gene. The genes together fit on a single chromosome. Chromosomes, as I said before, are broken up into genes. So here you can see the cell contains chromosomes. We unwind the chromosomes, we have a gene. We unwind the gene even further, and we have DNA. So a trait, we use a capital letter to represent the dominant trait, and we use a lowercase letter to represent a recessive trait. And this letter, capital and lowercase letters, are going to help us keep track of traits a little bit easier. Heredity is the transfer of traits from the parent to the offspring, and offspring is just a fancy way of saying the young. And we can use something called a Punnett square to calculate the probability that traits get passed on to the offspring. So as you can see right here, these are the father's genes. We write those across the top. The mother's genes, we write down the side. And then we simply fill in the Punnett square. So you can see the father has passed on 2 of the dominant traits, because they're capital letters, to the offspring. And the mother can only give little b's. When we see a big B like this in front of the little b, the dominant trait is going to win. So whatever the father's trait is here, that's what we're going to see in this offspring. Now, this does not mean that this father and this mother have exactly 4 children. This is just showing the probability that traits will be inherited. Genes, again, are factors that control traits. And here you can see on the chromosome, this would be an individual gene. And different forms of genes are called alleles. So the gene would be for plant height. The allele would be, okay, we've got a tall plant and a short plant, or a purple flower and a white flower. Phenotypes. Phenotypes are the physical appearance of the trait, so that's what we see. So if the person is tall, if the flower is purple, that's what we're seeing. The genotype would be the genetic makeup. So this would be the letter combinations oftentimes that we use to represent the genotype. When we describe genotype, we can also use words in addition to letters. So when we say that an organism is homozygous for a trait, that means that they have the same form of the gene. So either both big T's or both little t's. So this would be a tall plant, and this would be how we would represent a short plant, with short being the recessive trait. When an organism has different forms of a gene, we say it's heterozygous. So an example for this would be a big T from dad, a little t from mom. And so the organism would be tall because big T is dominant over little t. Again, this would be our phenotype, tall, and our genotype would be big T, little t. That's it for now. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background on genetics.